Gentlemen, welcome. Today I'm going to confuse the hell out of you guys, okay? So, as the title suggests, how to fall in love. Now, please, before you click off this or whatever, it does sound like a clickbaity type of spammy heading. But I can assure you that it is not, okay? So I'm going to make this into two parts. The first part, I'm going to give you some information, and this is all about science and biology and all that sort of stuff. It sounds pretty boring, but once you learn it, you can use this information to your advantage, okay? When I learnt it, it kind of like blew my mind. The second part is two things that you can do that will make her closer to you. Or actually, both of you close together, okay? Now, this is not text messages that you can send that's going to make her want you, and this is not playing games like street pickup type push pull, all that sort of stuff that you may have seen online before. It's nothing like that, okay? These are legitimate two ways, and when you hear them, and if you do them, and I hope that you do them, you will see that it will work. I know I have done it, and it does work, and it's pretty good. So anyway, this is part one of how to fall in love. So cue that music. Okay, so part one. Okay, so this is part one. So in this part here, I'm just going to go over a study that was done where they tried to determine the exact time when a man and a woman fall in love. Now let's just think about it just for a second, okay? So we talk about things like I'm in love. I have fallen in love, okay? I want to fall in love. But we don't actually stop to think about this for a second. Like, what is it? Falling in love? It makes no sense, really. No matter what country you're from, what culture you're from, anywhere in the world, you can live in the jungle and never ever meet any outside people. The feeling of falling in love is going to be the same. So it's a physiological reaction of hormones, chemicals, inside your body that creates a feeling that makes you feel close to somebody and that you actually love them. Animals experience the same thing as well. When I came back from Ukraine the first time and I had failed, I sort of became a little bit obsessed by this, and I wanted to figure out how people fell in love. Because if you can figure it out, surely instead of falling into love, you can jump into it a little bit more easily, because people just walk around. When you think about falling into love, you're walking around and stuff's just happening and you fall in love. But does it have to be that way? If you can understand when or why or how, you can make it happen. Surely, that's what I thought. That's what I wanted to find out. That was so important for me to try and figure it out. I didn't want to just randomly go and do it, because I tried to do that and it didn't work. So I wanted to put the cards into my favor. So that led me down the path of researching how and why and what happens to us when we have those feelings inside us that we can't wait to be with this person, that there's something drawing us to them. So this is from the research that I have found, and hopefully it helps you guys out a little bit. Same way, hopefully, that helps me. So this is pretty much how it goes from the research that I have done. So they wanted to figure out the exact moment when a guy and a lady fall in love, and there is that chemical reaction between inside each person and between each other. So it was hard for them to figure this out, because how do they do it? Do they find two people who've just fallen in love and say, quickly come with us, we want to do some tests on you and do some scans and try and figure out exactly what's happening? They couldn't do that. So the next best thing is that they had to find an animal that was in love. So what they did is they chose a hamster. I forget what the hamster's called. It's like a prairie, whatever, doesn't matter. It's a hamster anyway. And when this hamster meets another hamster and they mate, they stay together for life. Therefore, they were in love. So they already knew that when a person has a feeling of love, the dopamine levels go up, oxytocin levels go up. Dopamine is basically the happy hormone. So it makes us feel good when we're doing something that we enjoy, whether it's listening to music, whether it's eating our favorite food, whether it's hanging out with our buddies in the sun, drinking a beer. The dopamine is going to be up. Oxytocin is the hormone that makes us feel close to another human being or another animal, I suppose. So it's more commonly known with mothers and new infant children. So when they are bonding, this hormone is produced and they have a closeness, a bond that comes together. So they knew that dopamine and oxytocin are going to be present. They're present in these hamsters, and they know that they're present in humans as well. So they already knew that much, but they were trying to figure out the exact moment that it happens. So they got these two hamsters and they started to put them together. They measured the dopamine levels in the hamsters, and they noticed, they're looking at the female one here, they noticed that the dopamine levels were going up and getting higher and higher and higher as the hamsters came together. When they blocked the dopamine, the hamster was no longer interested in the male hamster. So they knew that dopamine had to be present. They knew this, but they knew that it couldn't be the only thing, because dopamine it just pops into your head when you're doing something like listening to music or something like that. So there has to be something else. So they knew that the oxytocin was also present as well. So they measured the oxytocin levels in the hamster. So as the male and female hamster were coming together to get it on, they measured the oxytocin levels in the female. And these levels, when the hamsters were getting close, or they were hanging out together, oxytocin levels were up by 50%. So they knew that they were rising. When they blocked the oxytocin, the hamster was no longer interested. So what happened when they mated? The oxytocin levels in the female went through the roof. So this gave them the understanding that once the female had sex with the male, the dopamine levels were high, the oxytocin were through the roof. If they blocked either one of them afterwards, the female would no longer be interested in the male. If the oxytocin and the dopamine were still high and still present, the female would stay with the male. They were technically in love. So they sort of started to feel like they had cracked the code a wee bit. Dopamine's up, oxytocin is up, they've just had sex. That's got to be something, right? She's in a euphoric mode. So they know that when someone is in love, oxytocin high, dopamine levels are high. So they look at the dude and they're like, dude, what are you doing? What's up with you? You must be in love too, right? And he's like, nah, not really. I just want to eat the sandwich or something. So they measure what's going on with him, okay? His dopamine levels are up, his oxytocin levels are down. Well, that makes no sense, because her ones are through the roof. So why is his ones down? They know that testosterone blocks oxytocin. They already knew this. So without oxytocin and dopamine, the feeling of love is never going to be there. Okay, so how are they going to get the levels up if testosterone is blocking the oxytocin down? Now let's just put this into a real world situation, okay? And like, you know, we're friends here, you know, we can talk about, you know, stuff that's happened. So let's just imagine you just had sex with some lady that you've met maybe once or twice, you met her at the club or whatever, and she's come back to your place and you've had sex. What happens after sex? Quite often, you know, let's be honest, come on. She wants to cuddle, what do you want to do? You want to get up and you want to go make a sandwich. You're not really interested in cuddling. You're not anywhere near close to having the euphoric feeling of falling in love. This is science. It starts to make a bit more sense now, right? So they look at another hormone, a little bit, and it's very similar to oxytocin, but it's called vasopressin. Okay, so vasopressin rises when the male is, basically he wants to have sex. So it rises when he wants to have sex. But unlike oxytocin, when he's had sex, it drops. So think about what I just said before about, you know, after you've had sex, you're sort of like, you know, you'll do anything. You'll say anything. You'll tell her that you love her. You're going to marry her, whatever you're going to say. But then when you've had sex, the vasopressin drops and you're like, nah, it's, I've got to go. So they knew that after the guy had sex, his oxytocin was down, the vasopressin went off the cliff. So he's nowhere near falling in love. It's this testosterone that's here that's blocking the oxytocin. I mean. So they figure out, I know this is going on for a long time, but bear with me, it's coming to the end. So they figured out that if they can keep the testosterone down and the oxytocin up, he'll be in the same position as the female and they can fall in love. But how do you get the testosterone down if he's like single and he's like, I just want to have sex and... So they looked at a study. And this study was done by the Army in the United States. And they studied guys from when they joined the Army to later on 20, 30, 40 years into the Army. They did tests and they check stuff and they do all these things. So they got the records for this. And when the guy joined the Army, they noticed his testosterone was really high. But then years later, it had dropped. And it had nothing to do with age. So they managed to work out that the guys that had the high testosterone were single. When they joined the Army, they might have been single, then they got married. But they were single. And then when they got married, the testosterone dropped really, really low. So something happened in between here, when they were single, and when they got married. So they thought, well, what's happened? So they did their own research and their own tests, and they tested single guys, guys in committed relationships, and married guys. And what they found is the single guys' testosterone was high. Married guys' testosterone was low. Guys in a committed relationship were exactly the same as the married guys. They were low as well. So what did they learn from this? The way that your testosterone can be low to stop blocking the oxytocin, so it can stay up there with the dopamine, is when these guys, or us, or you guys, are in a committed relationship. So the conclusion was, a guy falls in love, or he's ready to fall in love. His physiological side of him, inside him, in his brain, his hormones, the chemicals that are needed to fall in love, can only happen when he commits to a relationship, or he feels like he is going to commit. He's at a stage where he's going to commit into a relationship. It has nothing to do with sex for guys. For females, it has everything to do with sex. That is when they have the right amount of hormones to fall in love. But for guys, according to the study, it's when we're committed to the one single lady that we want to spend the rest of our lives with. When I read this and understood it, and I've simplified it a wee bit because it is a bit, for me it kind of changed the whole mindset. Because I would have thought that the female would fall in love with the commitment. But it's the guys that do it. And this is science. This is not, I haven't made this up. Nobody told me this down at the local bar when he was drunk. This is science. This is done from a study, and this is the conclusion that they drew from it, is that guys, when they're ready to commit, their bodies are ready to fall in love. So maybe if there's any ladies even watching this, maybe that's something that can help you guys as well, but completely different from when the female falls in love. Basically, when she has sex, especially if she has an orgasm, everything is like through the roof. For a guy, it's like, see you later. So, now that we know that information, like what good is it, right? How are we going to use it? Well, I guess it's understanding, like when I learned this information, for me it kind of changed everything, because this is based on science. They did these experiments, and you have to go with these experiments because there's really nothing else, and it does kind of make sense. So you can use this information to try and not fall into love, but to jump into love and try and make it happen. So we know when the female falls in love, we know when the male falls in love, so you can use that information to sort of juggle things around and try and put the cards into your favor. I used it for myself, so I withheld from having sex for a little bit of time, because I knew that if I did have sex too early, before we were close, I may not fall in love, and I wanted to fall in love. So you can use it this way in order to try and get things to work for you. But other than that, it's just useful information to have, because the more information that you have, like I say, the more successful you can be. So that's it. That's the moment that we and they, the ladies, fall in love. So that's part one of my How to Fall in Love series. The next part that I'm going to show you is just 2 things. And if you do these 2 things, you will be closer together. Trust me, I've done it and it does work. And I've never said anything that would put you guys wrong. So please trust me, please watch the next one. You will definitely benefit for it. So just click on something here or here.